Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Reunification Best Practices and Lessons Learned. My name is Scott Lowry. I'm the president and co-founder of StrataSite. As a lot of you know, StrataSite is a cloud-based platform that enables communities to create incident action plans, whether it's for a school or a large employment center, that identifies the command and control and tactical positioning of our resources. And it really marries up what is happening inside the facility and outside the facility so we can truly minimize the chaos during a critical incident. Work that I do at StrataSite, I'm also the lead trainer for two Department of Homeland Security courses, crisis management for schools. And that allows me the opportunity to travel across the country and work with a lot of different school districts. And on top of that is that I have the pleasure of teaching that class with Bill Titley. Bill, welcome this morning.
Thanks, Scott. Like you said, my name is Bill Titley, and I am the Director of Safety and Security for Fairborn City Schools, which is a relatively small community to the southeast of Dayton in southwestern Ohio. In addition to that, prior to that, rather, I was in law enforcement for about 27 years, started up in Findlay, and then retired from Fairborn City Schools. During that time, I spent about 12 years as an SRO and DARE officer, and also was on our tactical team. And then outside of that, working through the state academy, I was one of the co-authors of the state's solo officer response to active threat programs course that's still active to this day within Ohio.
Perfect. One more question before we move along. Who was your training officer in Findlay?
Well, miraculously, I survived 27 years in law enforcement after Scott Lowry was my training officer way back sometime in the 90s up in Findlay. Yes.
A long time ago. I think it demonstrates the resiliency that you have to be able to accomplish what it is you accomplished in your career.
Or your resiliency to have put up with me and survived. So either way.
True story. True story. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to kind of give you a roadmap on what we're going to do over the course of the next 90 minutes. Is that Bill and I are going to have a back and forth discussion in regards to reunification and what those best practices are. At the end, we're going to answer any questions that you may have. So as we progress through our slide deck and our conversation, if you have any questions, down at the bottom in your toolbar is the question and answer button. Hit that button, put in your questions, and we'd be more than happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. Once again, thank you for joining us, and let's get started.
Scott and everybody, before we actually roll into this reunification, I need everybody to kind of take a step back. We're all here for professional reasons. We all have jobs either in the schools or in law enforcement or other first responder, areas. But for instance, like I have four kids, right? He's got three kids and a couple of grandkids. And everybody here, think if you've got kids or grandkids or nieces or nephews or another child that you care about, don't look at this from the standpoint of as a police officer or as a school official or anything. Look at this as a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle. Would it keep your children, grandchildren, nieces, and nephews safe and keep them create less trauma in them after a critical incident at a school? That's kind of how to look at this whole thing, is what's going to keep my own kids safe. And if the answer is what they're talking about is going to keep them safer and get them out of there with less trauma, then that's the correct thing to be doing. I think we can probably all agree on that as we roll into the rest of this program. So,
and we often say, the number one commodity in a community is our children, and so great point. When I look at large scale critical incidents that happen in schools, is that I truly believe, and let's focus on that active shooter event, because that is the most catastrophic thing that can happen in a school. And if I truly believe, if we create a reunification process that will allow us to conduct business after that type of event, is that all the other reasons, more likely reasons that you will do reunification, those skills will just fall into place. And so looking at that active shooter, active assailant type of event, is that reunification is the most complex part of that. Is that we do a lot of work from a community standpoint in regards to dealing with the threat and that incident action plan in the building and being able to take care of those that are wounded. But it's the what's next, and that's really understanding that there's a lot of work that has to go into this. It's just not having something in your emergency operation plan. And one of the reasons that we find that it's so complex is that we're talking about a lot of people that students that we're trying to get back to their parents, and through all of the chaos that has erupted leading up to that. So as you can imagine, the emotions are high with everyone, staff, students, parents, emergency services, quite honestly. And so, looking at, the average size of a school building, and then thinking about who's all coming to that reunification site. Typically, we're looking at around 4 people. And so, once again, is that 4 people for every student that you have? Is that we're looking at 500 students? That's 2,000 people that are more than likely showing up at the reunification site. How do we manage all of those people coming to one location when that anxiety level is incredibly high? And when we start looking at not only the reunification process inside the building, what school staff is doing, but as a community, is that it takes a lot of cops, honestly, to be able to effectively do a reunification process. Where do all these cops come from? Now, is there, that 65 is we're looking at that from an average perspective, is that it really depends upon the size of the community and the region as to whether or not that number is going to be that high. If you're in rural America, that number may not be 65, but it probably exceeds the number of officers that you have within your organization. So it's just, thinking about that, is that it's going to, that alone will overwhelm the law enforcement agency that has that responsibility if there has not been that planning beforehand. When we look at that, the principles of effective reunification is that we always say that the communication is the key, and oftentimes that's the number one thing that fails during a critical incident is communication. So how do we ensure that we don't have that gap?
Uh, yeah, communication is definitely one of the principles that we need to circle back to every time we're doing any kind of planning for school safety, especially reunifications. And I'll bring it back to what happened to us in Fairborn. Number one on that list there is MOUs are crucial, but it's important to have relationships with the businesses and with the community members that you want to help in an event like this. And two, we need to make sure we don't just have relationships, but we have actual memos of understanding. What happened to us is where our reunification site is, it's a relatively large university with a big arena, big sports arena, and the director 10 years ago or 15 years ago said, sure, bring all your people down, we're good to go. Before I worked for the school district, I was working for the city, and so the school district's representative made me believe, I guess, in our conversation, I thought that we had actually gotten an MOU. Well, fast forward to where I'm working for the school district now a few years ago, and I went down there to just shore up the MOU and make sure it was renewed. And the new director had no idea what I was talking about, didn't know anybody from the school district, and had no idea that we were planning on coming there for reunification, which is a perfect example of why, just because, two people have a relationship and can talk about, sure, we'll help you however we can, we need to make sure it's in writing, and we need to make sure that the appropriate people know, and that we update it every year to make sure that we don't get caught without a place to reunify when we thought we had one. I'm not sure if that makes sense or not, but that was a perfect example of why that's so critical in my mind. And as a result, we now have updated MOUs all over the community. So, we see that a lot with grocery stores or large box stores. If a school has had an agreement, hey, if we have a disaster, we need X things, and the general manager says, sure, come on down, but then we change general managers and they don't know what to expect. So
Exactly. And that interoperable communications, what is it that we're looking at there?
yeah, well, a couple of things. One, the school has to make sure that they can communicate outside of their buildings. They have to have a radio system or some way to communicate, not just in the buildings, but if they have to relocate people, they have to be able to communicate possibly over large distances at that new site. So their radio system or whatever they're using has to be able to work there. Additionally, they really should be able to communicate outside of their network to law enforcement, other first responders, and potentially even other school districts, depending on how their radio or their communication systems are set up. But it can't just be we have little walkie-talkies that we can just talk amongst ourselves within our building. So
Okay, that makes sense. We always talk about the fact that command and control is extremely important when it comes to a critical incident, and how we want the district staff to be engaged with emergency services and that true unified command. How does that incident command system transfer from the school building to the reunification site? And does it transfer?
I'm not sure transfer, maybe not transfer is the right phrasing or wording, but just like at whatever the affected site is, whatever they have going on, just like they're using a unified command and implementing incident command system or need to be, we need to have a very similar structure over at the reunification site. Now there might be an overall, unified command that's going to kind of be at least watching from a 30,000-foot view both sites. However, at the actual reunification site, there needs to be an on-site incident commander, and they actually need to set up their span of control just like we would at the affected site. Because ultimately they need to make decisions quickly on the ground at the reunification site and not be calling back to the unified command at whatever the affected site is for every decision. But we have to keep in mind that span of control and not have one person in charge of the whole reunification site who's trying to make decisions for 20 or 30 people. That doesn't work any better than it would at the affected site.
Okay, that makes sense. I talked about the law enforcement component and historically what we have seen, what is needed at the reunification site from that perspective is that when we're talking about schools and those other community stakeholders, what is it that your vision is for that?
For law enforcement, is that what?
From the school's perspective,
Yeah.
and as it says here, is that more manpower is more than what you think you need. From a school's perspective, how does that work? How do we accomplish that?
Okay, so and we'll get into this later too, but from a school perspective or school manpower, what we have done, and we stole it from somebody that I'm sure had thought of it well before we did, who probably stole it from somebody else also. But we actually have a countywide reunification team. So if we have to, for instance, evacuate our high school and we're moving to our reunification site, we don't have to rely on staff within our building, nor staff within the rest of our district, other than our board office staff. What we do is we start calling schools around the county and they send their reunification teams. So we suddenly have manpower that is not from an affected site or from an affected district, that has been similarly trained to us, which we'll get to that as well. But we all went through the same training and all have the same type of kits. And we'll be drilling together in the future as well. So everybody who's coming from a school perspective knows what's happening. From a first responder, fire, and law enforcement perspective, this is where that a unified command is so crucial at the affected site, because when they have unified command, then we're also going to be having staging. And when staging is implemented at the affected site, as more first responders arrive than are initially needed, the person who's in charge of staging can then start funneling them to reunification, which provides, because we all know, anybody in law enforcement and fire, we all know that people are coming from all over. Even when told we don't need you anymore, they're still coming. So if we get them to staging, which is what should happen, then they can be sent to reunification and given jobs there as well. I'm not sure if that cleared that up or made it more muddy, but
No, I think so. Is that, and just kind of wrap a bow in that, is that even if you don't have a countywide initiative like Bill talked about, is that think about redundancy. Is that I've identified this number of school staff members that are going to be part of my reunification team, is that build in some redundancy so that you know is that you're going to need more than what you anticipated, is that then you're minimizing that gap, is and just think about from all of those perspectives. I've identified this, now I need to make sure that I have more than what I'm actually needing. um these lessons learned have resulted in, like I said at the beginning, some trainings that we have done across this country, and had conversations with communities that have done reunification. Just kind of run through these and talk about what we have learned from this slide.
yeah, so for the next several slides, we'll go general lessons learned and then some specifically from Sandy Hook. And like Scott said, a lot of these came from when we've been training across the country. Different districts have told us. Additionally, several of us have attended the briefings through I Love You Guys, and they have presented quite a few of these lessons learned as well. And what we see is these common themes over and over and over again. It doesn't matter if it was a reunification in Houston, as they've done many, if it was in Newtown, Connecticut, or here in Ohio. It doesn't matter that we see these recurring themes. And one of them, if we go through these, we have to account for kids who leave. And anybody who follows the ALICE program or any of the other active shooter survival programs in schools, a component of that is self-evacuation if necessary or if able to. So we're going to have kids that are going to leave, and we're not going to know where they went. And that's one thing. Then we're going to have parents show up at the reunification site asking for their child, and we don't have any idea where they are because we can't account for them. And what it seems to be, again, a common theme across the country is let the kids know if you self-evacuate, good, you're safe. Now let somebody know that you did that. Let the school district know, let your parents know that you did that so we can find you. I guess that would be that one. We have to also count in these recurring themes is somebody shows up to a reunification site with more information than the reunification site is giving out to the parents, specifically so-and-so children were injured or killed, or other information, or they'll show up and say, oh, we have, they'll be giving information that isn't necessarily correct. We need to make sure we prepare for that and be ready to account for that information as well. And then third, anybody that's been involved in a critical incident, the media beast, we need to make sure that we plan for the media. And we'll get into that later on as well. But we need to make sure we give them a place to go and don't just come up with it that day. It should be pre-planned, and really the media should know where they're to go. For instance, we have let our media, we've let them know, our local media, where we want them to be, where we will give them media briefings ahead of time for each school and our reunification sites. So that's one decision we don't have to make on game day.
Very nice.
Yeah, these come, especially this first one. Again, we're leaning heavily on the I Love You Guys briefings, where they actually gave lots of lessons learned from multiple different districts. But we've got to have more mental health professionals than we think we would need as well, and not just in counseling rooms, but also with the kids who are waiting because they've experienced a traumatic event. Doesn't matter if they're pre-K all the way up through 12th grade. In fact, some of the older kids even will understand more how traumatic the incident was. But also with parents who are out in line waiting because they don't have any idea. Their most precious creatures on the face of the planet to them are in behind that wall, and they don't know, they don't have answers yet. So we need to provide that as well. The second one down there, we should plan for our phones to not work. We see over and over again in reunification sites, the phones don't work, whether they're hardwired or cell phones. Sometimes even the text messages don't work. So we have to plan for that. And then if they work, great. But if they don't work, then at least we've already planned for it. And then kind of going along with the first part, that last one, we've got to give parents information. We have to have people who are pushing information, as much information as we have out to those parents. They need information. Kind of what we've done for all critical incidents, for no matter what it is we shoot for a goal of within 10 minutes of the incident happening, get information out to the parents. We really try for 5, but 10 is kind of our hard cutoff, and give them as much information as we can possibly give them. And that's a best practice. That's not a Fairborn thing. That's just a best practice in crisis communications. But it's beyond crisis communications. We're giving parents information about their children and their children's safety. So
I want to dive into that just with one quick question in regards to that messaging to parents. Is that do you utilize canned messaging that you have already prepared prior to the incident that you can then feed that demographic?
yes, yeah, we actually started that about 2.5 years ago. We had a threat that kind of spun up out of control about 3 or 4 years ago, and we never could really catch up because we got behind the information curve on social. So what we did was we put together a large number of templates for everything we could think of, up to and including different reunification scenarios. And we obviously have to tweak them a little bit, but multiple people in the district have access to those. So when we have something we need to push out, we probably already have a template for it. So we can just change a couple dates, names, or whatever, and then push it out right away. Which again, I mentioned it once already, and I'll mention it a lot more. It saves us having to think, and saves us having to make as many decisions on game day. We've pre-planned it, so we can use our brain power to solve problems that are right in front of us instead of trying to make up, press releases that make sense. We've done that when we're not stressed out already.
Good stuff. First of all, before we get into these next couple slides, is that I don't want anybody to perceive that what we're talking about in regards to Sandy Hook is us being judgmental on that community at all. The unthinkable happened that day in Newtown, and a lot of the things that they did, right, wasn't due to negligence. It was just due to a lack of pre-planning, and we truly believe that if we evaluate previous events and find the gaps and educate people on what those gaps were, is that we can minimize them in the future going forward. So I don't want anybody to think that we're picking on that specific Sandy Hook being that specific, that specific event, picking on Sandy Hook. um, but Bill, getting into some of those lessons that were learned at Sandy Hook.
Yeah, and to further what Scott just said, actually, and this all came directly from Carly Posey, who does a fantastic job presenting on her perceptions of and her experiences. She had children at Sandy Hook, 2 of them, and so she does a very good job breaking down what happened. And again, hers also was not from a hey, they did this wrong. It was from a hey, let's not do any of this again. So take all of that. As we both said. So we have to make sure, and what happened there is the other parents and other kids in the district weren't necessarily attended to because Sandy Hook Elementary was such a traumatic, horrible event. So what was happening was parents weren't getting information who had kids at other schools. They couldn't go pick their kids up. The kids were kept on lockdown for a very long time. And the parents weren't getting told anything. Likewise, the kids weren't really getting told anything within the buildings either. In addition to that, as the day wore on, when they finally did start sending the kids home, Newtown, Connecticut's a very small town, and traffic was gridlocked, as you can imagine. So the buses, even once they loaded the kids on the buses, it took them hours to get home. And so the parents were told, your kids are on the buses, they're on their way home. And then they didn't come home. And I think in Carly's case, I don't want to quote her, but I think it was 2 hours from the time that she got the call, the kid should be home. I mean, she could just about, see up the street to where the school was until her last child actually got off that bus, and when it should have been a 5 or 10 minute ride, and they didn't understand why the kids weren't coming home. So that further added to the trauma when it didn't have to, with just better communications. Which is what it comes down to. And if you look at those principles, the number one principle we talked about early on was communication. We have to push out communications.
Yeah.
One other thing that happened, and it's fairly easily rectified, and now look in hindsight, looking back, it almost seems like a no-brainer. But at the time, technology wasn't exactly where it is now. But a lot of the teachers didn't have class lists with them, so when they evacuated, they didn't necessarily know what contact information they had for which kids, and there wasn't a district-wide clearinghouse that they could put their hands on very quickly, and that's easily solvable. Um, a lot of districts solutions to that, unfortunately, are cloud-based. But if we go back to the phones don't work, if the phones aren't working, probably the internet may well not be working. So I would encourage all districts to have a way to solve that problem without using the word internet or cloud. What we have done is we once a month reflash it on flash drives. So we have everything up to date at the beginning of every month. And then those flash drives are in two different places within the district. So we know we can get to them. To have all of our parent information. Is that the right way to do it? I don't know, but that works for us. And if you find a better way to come up with that, let us know, because I'd love to hear it. Because
Good stuff. We talked about how complicated reunification is, and pre-planning is really the key to a successful reunification process. And we've talked about up to this point, kind of, you know, hey, this is what this monster looks like. These are some of the lessons learned, and why do we need to have a well planned out reunification system? Is that I think that we've already kind of said it, is that we're talking about parents who want their babies back. We're talking about high level of anxiety within the entire community. And if we create these relationships with emergency services, is that we can efficiently, all right, not quickly, but efficiently get kids back to their parents. There are different models in regards to reunification in America. I truly believe that uh, I Love You Guys Foundation is the gold standard of reunification in this country. There has been a lot of work done by a lot of smart people within that organization in regards to determining what makes sense in the real world. And so is that, and not only that, but they'll give it to you for free. All right, is that it's the best, and you don't have to pay for it. At the end of the day, it's a no-brainer to me. The information that they provide, that you can download is really straightforward, and provides great guidance on developing that emergency operation plan. Bill, I know that have been deeply involved with I Love You Guys in regards to bringing it to Fairborn and those kinds of things. Anything that you want to say at this
yeah,
point?
everything Scott just said is 100% correct. I've never seen an organization that has so much good information that can do so much good, both through their reunification method and their standard response protocol, that you can just go on their website and download everything. And it's not only just, are you going to download to look at it, but for instance, they recommend reunification cards. We'll just get into this real quickly. They provide these. You can actually download the file that's on an Adobe file, and if you have the correct perforated paper stock, you can go ahead and print it off. It's all completely free of charge. And having said that, and this is going to sound like a commercial for them, they do offer trainings that are not free. And I thought initially, well, who really needs that? But when we were trying to put our county team together, I said, well, we've already read the manual. Let's look into bringing them here. And I will tell you that bringing them to our district for our whole county team was absolutely a game changer. So yes, you're gonna get 90% of the absolute amazing stuff they put together, absolutely 100% for free. But bringing them to us and training with them for 2 days, like I said, it was an absolute game changer, and I cannot recommend that highly enough. And I have recommended it incredibly highly to multiple districts around too. It's phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. So
Multiple times, highly
yeah,
recommended
yeah,
it
yep.
multiple times.
How many times have you heard me say that, Scott, across the country? So.
Right. So looking at that I Love You Guys process, is there we're gonna talk about this 8-step process in developing a reunification plan. If you're sitting here and you're thinking, Scott and Bill, we already have one. All right,
Cool.
great. But sit tight, listen to what we've got to say in regards to this, and you may be able to enhance what you already have. Look, at the end of the day, is that it's got to be more than just putting pen to paper and creating something within your emergency operation plan. Is that there has to be some conversations as a community, and not only the school district, but as a community. And so when we're looking at building these planning teams, is that having that district guidance, and in regards to how do we want this reunification process to work, and then down to the building level, building administrators, building principals, and just building administrators being involved in that process. SROs is the school resource officers, that the face of the law enforcement organization within the with the school district. Right, valuable tool for a lot of reasons, and SROs need to be part of this planning team. But I also need the SRO's boss part of that planning team. All right, somebody from command staff of that law enforcement agency that can provide guidance and on what uh, the agency as a whole and what their capabilities are in regards to this, and number two is so that they understand what the responsibilities are from an agency standpoint, not just their SRO in the school and being involved in the reunification as an entire agency, and being able to manage that. Bill, what's the value of emergency management being involved in reunification?
If any districts or communities are not heavily involved with their emergency management agencies, I would highly recommend you link up with them. They're sometimes they're the kind of the forgotten heroes in all of this. They can bring to bear resources and connections that the school district alone can't do, fire alone generally can't, and law enforcement can't. They can reach out. They have very long tentacles, which our EMA director doesn't like when I say, but they have very long tentacles, and can reach out to not only within your community, but other communities, other counties, and other states as well if they need to get resources to you very quickly. Don't forget them. They're fantastic resource, and they have been exceedingly happy to help in every community I've been in. So
Fire.
100%. They're going to be critical. They're the critic. They're one of the four pillars of this. We have the schools, the law enforcement, EMA, and fire. We're going to need medical support at the reunification site. We may well need manpower support and the big shiny red truck support blocking roads off even as well. And they're fantastic planners, and there's nobody better at incident command than fire.
Amen. Amen.
I won't make the cat in the tree joke.
Today.
I think I just did.
So figuring out who needs to be part of this process, and then building that district reunification, is that, as you know, that 30,000 feet perspective on what the philosophy and processes of the entire district are going to be, has to be part of that process. um, Bill, when as you guys were enhancing your reunification process, really from the district planning perspective, what are some things that we want people to know?
Well, one of the things and just like EOPs, it can't be a canned thing where you just get it from somebody else. Don't just download, and I love you guys, their reunification plan and call it a day. You have to do it from a district standpoint and really break it down building to building as well. We're fortunate that we have one reunification site that we use for everybody in the district, and then we have a backup if we need it. I know there's some districts that are very spread out. We were just up training way up north, and they're very spread out, and it's not realistic to have different buildings within a county going to the same place. But if you can have one reunification policy that will cover all the buildings with some minor nuances within each building, that's good. But if each building is going to be somewhat different or different sites, make sure you have a different plan for each site, so that we don't just have that plan in a can that everybody warns about for the emergency operation plans as well. And also make sure we plan for command and control, which we already talked about. It's not going to be unified command from the affected site. It should be its own incident command at the actual reunification site, and you will need that.
Yeah. Typically, who runs reunification
From
post
a state
critical incident?
post, the school will be at reunification running, is that what you're asking about? Generally,
Who from that district organizational typically is the person running the reunification site? Is it the building principal, superintendent,
we
assistant
we
superintendent?
we generally plan, we try to plan for a building administrator if we can do that, or somebody from the board office, one of the directors, or the superintendent. I'm sorry, the assistant superintendent, understanding that that probably the principal is going to be tied up at the affected site, and probably the superintendent's going to be tied up at unified command. Understanding that, we plan for kind of somebody, a building administrator though, and a district administrator to be at there and actually running it. But ultimately, it's going to come down to who is trained and who's able to be that incident commander on scene, just like we talk about with when we're talking about on-scene emergencies at the affected site, who's capable of being that incident commander at the time. But we train the building admin and district admin to do that.
I just had a question pop in my head. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm kind of catching Bill off guard with this. This isn't
Fantastic.
scripted. Is that when I look at that command and control from your model, all right, what you're doing in Greene County is that you've got this entire county, everyone's trained the exact same way, doing one process, the exact same process. Is that if I bring a team from another school district, do they bring their incident commander with them as well?
What we've done is when we did the training for the county team, is each school had a representative or two, and then the board office or the central office had some representatives as well. We kind of left it as we're going to try to have somebody from the home district try to at least initially be the incident commander, if that's possible. The good news is that everybody is trained the same way. So if we have to put somebody in, or if the home district doesn't have anybody they can push in for whatever reason, then anybody responding really is able to work that. Yeah.
Perfect. Makes sense. I recently read an article that was talking about that administrative function with after a critical incident, specifically active assailant, active shooter types of events, where neighboring superintendents would come and assist the superintendent in being able to manage that event, so that is that it happened to them, so there was that concern about them being able to effectively be a superintendent. And that kind of popped into my mind as you were talking about command and control for reunification. So building that redundancy in once
Absolutely.
again,
Yep.
thinking about that. Individual school reunifications, we build that district philosophy, processes, and then each individual school needs to think about their plan and how that's going to function. Is that and how do we do that? Some of these key components. Bill's going to run through these and just kind of give us some things to think about.
Yeah, if from a difference in school perspective, the easiest way to think about it is our primary building is pre-K through 2, and our high school is ninth grade through 12th grade. If we just look at it forget the geography or the building differences, if we just look at it from purely age standpoint, those two groups of kids need vastly different support at the reunification site. So that's one thing that's a huge difference. We need to make sure we plan for how old are the kids. If our reunification kits have activities for the kids that are appropriate for the pre-K kids probably aren't appropriate for the 9th, 10th, or 11th grade kids, right? So that's just an example of what to keep in mind. From a logistical standpoint, we need to have all this stuff planned out, and we're going to get to that when we get to the tabletops and the drills. But we need to know where the parents are going to check in. We need to know where we're going to bring students to put them into the staging area, and we're going to talk about exact locations here in a little bit too. And then we need to make sure we have different people, different staff assigned to different jobs. Greeters specifically are the ones who are actually out there. They're the ones who can be firm if they need to be, but they also have the gift of gab, and they can be out there talking to the parents, getting them the reunification cards to start filling out. and kind of telling people, hey, here's how it's going, and here's what information we have to give you. They're really the face of the operation because they're out with everybody. And then we need to make sure that we have people inside who can bring the kids from staging to meet up with their parents as well. And again, this is all directly from the model that's set up by I Love You Guys, and that's researched and trial and error based for a very long time now. So
Right. Good stuff. Perfect. Picking that site, where are we going to do reunification for our students? Bill talked about the fact that he has a university in his community, which has a large, you know,
arena.
facility to be able arena. Thank you, to be able to do that. Is that not everybody has that that resource available to us, and when we look at previous reunifications that have happened, and our evaluations of them, is that we have seen multiple times is that schools moving students from the building out to the football field. I will tell you that from my perspective, I don't think that this is a good idea. And as you can see, is that we've listed the some of the reasons why it is not a good idea. And I think from my perspective, the biggest concern here is being able to maintain control. Uh, and because when you've got students in an outdoor event area like that, and they see their parents and parents see the students after a critical incident, I'm afraid you're going to lose all control and not be able to do that reunification process as you have that protocol. Bill, what are your thoughts on the football field?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And we just saw this, I believe it was last year at a school outside of Atlanta, where they evacuated the football field. And again, this isn't a slight on them. Um, they did absolutely the best they could with what they were trying to do. But what we saw was people were parked, and the football field was right behind the school, which was the affected site. So we have first responders in there, we have medical personnel in there, we have lots of police presence again, and then we have parents and it was reported all over the place that they were parking over a mile away and running up through the whole scene to try to get to the football field. And if you saw footage from the football field, there was absolutely no control, which is what Scott said. And as soon as parents saw kids and kids saw parents, they couldn't control anybody. They had no accountability. Were very difficult to maintain accountability, not to mention security concerns. It's wide open area, and you can't really seal that off very well either. They had good weather, luckily, but if it would have been horrible weather, same thing. So those are all reasons why you should really think hard and think 2 or 3 or 10 times about, do I want to use an open air facility like that for reunification?
Joining schools, is that numerous times we have been in communities conducting training, and we ask, where's your reunification site? Do you have a site selected? Yes. Where is it? The elementary school or the middle school next door, and or the middle school, high school down the street, where they're going to move students from one school to another school. Now, I will say this, is that we have been in places of rural America where there's not a facility and within 40, 50, 60 miles of this school building that's large enough to house their student population. So it's about, this is not preferred. It's not an absolute don't do it, but it really is. There's a lot of hurdles to overcome if you're going to use another school, let alone an adjoining school within your school district. Is that, there has to be this controlled release of the students that are in the building where you're doing reunification before you can move students to that building to be able to do reunification. A lot more moving parts to that. Bill, any comments?
And Scott, did you include that in the notes, the link to Rigby? Is that included in there?
I'm going to, yeah,
Okay. All right.
yes.
Yeah. So the one that comes to mind specifically is Rigby, Idaho. who it was a district that had planned. They'd planned for all kinds of threats. They'd planned for their reunification. They had practiced it. They tabletopped it. They drilled it. They had exercises. They'd done a fantastic job of everything. But on game day, what happened was that they had a shooting at their middle school. They evacuated the high school and did reunification from their high school, which was still in session. And by the time the reunification got going, it was about the time the high school was letting out. And I'll let everybody play that out in their heads of how that went. The good news is that when we got there to train with them, it was fairly fresh in there to them, and they had changed what they did immediately thereafter. In their after action, they figured out what wasn't going to work and what did work, and so they changed their processes. And then they had another critical incident just a few months later that they got to use their new reunification process, which was off-site. And they said the difference was stark in on-site, which was a complete mess. Everybody was upset. The kids were all upset. The parents were upset and mad at them because they couldn't get their high school kids either. They couldn't get to the high school to get the middle school kids. And then when they changed to the new location, what happened was all of that pressure went away. And so I would encourage you to read that after action report from Rigby, Idaho. That's an example of a community that had planned ahead, and when they found out on game day what they were doing didn't work, they then changed it, and then their next game day, lo and behold, everything did work because of all the hard work they had done since the first incident. So.
Perfect. And if everybody takes a look in the chat, there is a link to that after action review in Idaho. Good stuff. Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
So we talked about where not to do it. Where's the preferred site for doing reunification in your community? I think that when we start looking at a building that obviously we can get the students indoors, large enough to house the entire student population, and thinking about the number of people that are coming to the reunification site, how can I effectively control that traffic flow, both ingress and egress from the sites, and obviously is that we're talking about a building within your community outside of the school district. So going back to what Bill talked about, that MOU, making sure that it's more than just a handshake, and that we have an actual agreement on utilizing that facility. Bill?
Yeah, if you remember back to one of those first slides that had the numbers on it, and the middle number was 4+, and that was how many adults generally show up to reunification per child, right? Well, they don't all show up in one car. They're going to show up. If there's 4 adults coming, they're going to show up in 6 cars. You assume Murphy's going to show up with them. So we have to really plan for not just how do we get cars in and out. We have to plan for parking spots as well. And the running joke here in town is when we were trying to figure out our reunification sites, our secondary one, there were some people that were pushing to have different sites used, and it came down to pulling up satellite imagery and counting parking spots. And that's nowhere near as cool as you would think it would be. But what we found was that there were some sites we didn't even consider that had good ingress and egress and had lots and lots of parking that we hadn't even looked at. And so that's going to be one of the key ones. You have to have good ingress and egress. We have to have a place to hold the kids. And just because it's a place to hold the kids, it's got to be big enough to hold everybody, or, the crew that's coming there. So that's really some things you need to take a look at. Also, is the perimeter able to be secured as well, with a reasonable amount of law enforcement? So.
All right. Absolutely. And this is just an example of that traffic flow, is that all right, 15-second spot on StrataSite, is that that's part of our platform, is being able to create what that you want that traffic flow to look like from an incident action plan or from a reunification standpoint. Think about it. Push this out to parents. This is the path that I want you to take to the schools through our mass notification, emergency notification systems, using that platform to communicate with parents information that's relevant to them coming to the reunification site. Not only text information on what it is that we want them to do when they get there, but let's give them a visual aid, pushing this out to the media, those types of things. So, from a law enforcement perspective, is that, this isn't rocket science to us, is the developing traffic flows. And so thinking about what that looks like, and and how you want that to work for you. Bill, anything before I move on?
You mentioned you dropped StrataSite in there. What I'll say is when I was SRO, I helped develop all the incident action plans for all of our schools and our reunification. And it took me an entire summer to snipping tool everything and drop little arrows everywhere and try to figure stuff out. And we've now partnered with StrataSite, and I'll tell you the difference from what I did back then to what our SROs and our command staff are doing now is astounding without sounding too much like a StrataSite commercial. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah,
But finding
yeah.
pre-planning traffic flow, and that might even go so far as to contact ODOT or whoever your state's Department of Transportation is to make the big electric signboards. Find out who you need to call to get those and get MOUs in place for those, and figure out how do you program them. So because if you can get them out there in an hour from critical incident time to get them set up to direct traffic, that will go a long way as well. Not just barrels and barricades, but also if you can get some electric signboards, that would help as well.
Good stuff. Additional on-site considerations. Walk us through this.
Same thing. We've been saying over and over again, you're going to need more people than you think you're going to need. And everybody always said that, and I've been preaching it. But when we actually have done all of our walkthroughs for reunification, you need more people than you think you do. And first responders as well. Just like on a critical incident scene, if you start putting emergency responders in, their numbers get eaten up very quickly. With watching corners, watching doors. Our school staffing gets eaten up quickly with watching kids, taking care of each other, taking care of the kids, making sure that we have plenty of greeters, plenty of reunifiers, plenty of people who can check in people up at the tables. You really start and needing people that are resting so they can come in when other people get tired as well. So you really start eating up manpower very, very quickly. Having a team, like I said, I didn't make that up. So I stole it from someone. Having a team that's outside of your district really helps because those people are coming from a non-affected site. So you can have their full attention and their heads in the games. You don't have to worry about them with their students or anything like that. Their sole job is to be there to reunify your people. So you go ahead, Scott.
No, I didn't have anything
Oh,
additional.
okay. Yeah.
No. Um, good.
Yeah, we talked about clergy already. One thing, I guess, with death notifications and for the law enforcement people that are in this, we've all done death notifications, probably dozens and dozens of them. But we have to remember that first of all, and we all remember the first death notification we did. Well, the notification we're doing to that parent is the only one they probably ever gotten, and they'll never ever forget it. So we need to make sure, and it takes a toll on us as well, those who are doing the death notifications. We need to make sure that we have a plan in place of who's going to do them, and that we don't have one. If we have a lot that we have to do, we don't have one person, and it's always the superintendent. It seems like feels like they should do them. We have a plan in place to have somebody do them to spread it around if we need to, so that we don't absolutely destroy one person. So that was a lot of ideas in one run-on sentence, I think, but.
But I think that that has to be part of that conversation that we as a community have, right? I mean, with when it comes to reunification, um, you know, what does that breakout room look like? Who's in that room? Beforehand. And I don't remember if Bill mentioned it or not. Mental health and clergy have to be part of that conversation along in that death notification piece, depending on your community and really the culture within your community as to whether or not you have clergy in there. Um, just because you preach on Sunday doesn't mean that you're qualified to give death notifications, though. Is making sure that we have trained personnel that are doing that. Bill, one of the things that often comes up and I've been told is that almost always post active shooter event in schools, there's parents that don't show up at reunification.
Yep. Yep.
How do we address this?
Everybody we've ever talked to that's ever done a reunification will all tell you that's it's that. Anybody that's let kids out of school on a regular Monday at 3 o'clock will tell you there's parents that don't show up also. There's a couple ways we can do it, and I guess to start at the least impactful way on the kid is, if we get a parent that can't come, but we call them or they call in and say, look, I can't make it, I'm out of town or whatever, Joe can pick my kid up or whatever. We have to have in writing that says, who's allowed to pick who up. But if we know we're talking to Sally's mom on the phone, if we know that for sure, we know her, we know it's her we're talking to, and she gives us the name of somebody who can pick them up, and we check them through. We happen to use Raptor. We check them however we can, or have law enforcement check them out, make sure they're not wanted or anything like that, and then talk to the kid, and the kid says, absolutely, I'm comfortable going home with them, then we have that option to do that. We can do that. However, if that option isn't available, and Scott, you dig into this deeper than I do, but we can turn them over to law enforcement, and then law enforcement can determine what's best for them from there. I'll tell you, that's not going to make any law enforcement happy to tell them that. And the SROs out there in this webinar right now are cringing when we said that, but that possibility does exist. What we need to do in reunification, as with any crisis planning, is not do any more harm than is already done. And if we have a kid sit there at reunification for hours because nobody's there to get them yet, we have to ask ourselves, are we doing more harm than already happened to them? So we need to find creative ways and talk about that and think about it before game day, as with everything else too. Have a plan before game day so we don't have to burn up our mental horsepower on that. That's an easy conversation to have when we're not stressed out at 5:30 in the afternoon after the most horrible day of all of our lives. So let's plan for it well ahead of time and have that conversation.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And real quick on that custodial issue is that the only reason that I came up with that process, of introducing law enforcement, because Bill's right, every cop in this webinar right now kind of cringed. But you think about it, is that if I assign someone that has decision making authority within a law enforcement organization as a liaison to that reunification site, so when these issues come up, is that they can make a decision and they don't have to get permission from a boss. And it becomes using that statutory authority that we have within our states, is that being able to take that child into custody. Because I've run into superintendents, school administrators that are, it's a hard stop if parents aren't on that emergency notification form. They're, if an adult is not on that form, they're not getting the kid. All right, well, there's got to be some flexibility here. So if you're adamant about that, then how do we overcome it? And that's how I got to that, is that law enforcement piece, because it really, most laws in this country are written pretty straightforward. Is that, especially like here in Ohio, there's the threshold for law enforcement to take a child into custody for the safety of the child. It's pretty low. All right, let's talk about some supplies that we need to have, and some considerations in regards to maintaining those supplies. I think that, first of all, is that I Love You Guys gives you a comprehensive list of things that you need to have in your reunification kit. So 100% go get that list. If you already have a kit, compare what they recommend to what you have, and all of a sudden you're getting a more robust kit. But going through these items that we have on the slide here, is that I think most of them are self-explanatory. But there's a couple. Is that printer paper? Bill, what are we accomplishing?
Yeah.
Why do I need it? Printer paper.
For all of the great stuff that we can pre-plan, and I thought I had it here, but I don't. And like we talked about, I Love You Guys, you can download their whole reunification stuff, which has all the arrows of where to go and everything. For all of that stuff, you're going to get to a point in reunification when all of a sudden you don't have the right signage. Your signage is not there, or somebody misplaced a folder or whatever. Or you need to start a new list, or you need somebody to take notes or something. So having paper there, probably a ream of paper that you can use for anything you need, is going to be invaluable. It could be as simple as the kids are getting bored and they're going to have a paper airplane throwing contest in the gym all their way. It could be something as simple and silly as
Right.
that. But have an extra paper on scene where you don't have to go begging from your site. It will be crucial. And in talking to people that have done these, every one of them says, "Yeah, absolutely, have extras." And anybody who's done anything with kids knows you need lots of extra paper and pens anyway, everywhere, all the time. So.
Business cards.
Bit kind of along the same lines, you may need something to write on. I like them blank cards, but the actual district name, the district cards, but without a name. So you could, if you need to give somebody a note real quick, or have additional information to give write down somebody, or hey, yeah, here's my name. Feel free to call. Or if clergy happens to be there, but they don't have cards, then you can give them one of those, and they can put their names on them. Just kind of a do all generic business card.
Perfect.
Yep, yep.
Good stuff. Lastly, duct tape.
Because it sticks to everything. Because you're going to need it. And if you don't need
Yeah.
it, you'll find a reason to need it.
Yeah.
It's the same reason we should have duct tape everywhere. If you need to put those extra signs up, or even the regular signs up that you didn't take into account, we got these cool signs, they're all laminated, but we don't know how to stick them on the wall now. Having duct tape there and replenishing that every year or so, because it does dry out, is a good thing. So
Yeah. Well, and that goes along with the batteries. When you switch
yeah,
out the batteries, make sure that you are checking the duct tape as well.
yep, yep.
Having a plan is great. Don't care what kind of plan it is, but if the people that were wanting to perform within this protocol, if they don't know what our expectations are of them, the likelihood of them doing it is almost zero in a very sterile environment, let alone in a very high stress environment. So education is the key. So is that Bill has done significant work in regards to engaging with stakeholders, both internal and external, about his reunification. So I kind of want to ping him on what he's doing and how he's doing it. Educating students. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, well, and this is kind of the model we use. We just switched this year to officially to the standard reunification for the standard response protocol. And so this is the model we've been using to teach the kids that. And then as we go through, get done with SRP, then we will move into the reunification as well. I know there's some schools that use the large format and put everybody in their auditorium and talk about it. What I've seen, at least in our district and a lot of other districts I've talked to, is hit the individual classrooms, maybe 1 week hit all freshmen, and have the classroom teacher, and if you got SROs or somebody who really knows what they're talking about with it, go in and just hit the class for max of 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, give them a brief overview and let them kind of hear about, and I Love You Guys has some great videos to show both adults, staff, and or parents, staff, and kids, about kind of what to expect, both for the response protocol and for the reunifications. Don't saturate them. We don't need to spend a bunch of class time. Teachers, everybody's freaked out about having enough instruction time. Max of 10 minutes. Give them a quick down and dirty. Here's what to expect, and move on with it. But hit them with that about every year if you can, so they've heard it over and over again. Obviously, age appropriately also.
Point repetition.
Yep.
Parents. All right. I'm a big advocate before I turn this over to Bill, is that I truly believe that knowledge is power. And the more knowledge that we give parents in regards to all things school safety, all right, what we're doing to prevent bad things from happening to your children in the building, what it is that we want your children and you to do if an emergency happens, right? All hazards approach, and spending some time with them on educating them on what our active assailant protocol is from a district perspective, and so that they understand what it is we're going to have their children do, what our expectations are of their children, and what our expectations are of them. And then finally is that reunification. And if you don't tell me from a parent's perspective, my child is in that building and there was an active shooter event, and you don't tell me where to go, I'm probably coming to the school. All right, because that's all I know. You're not feeding me information. So this is kind of where we don't disagree, but we don't. totally agree on this. I think educating parents on the reunification process and where the reunification site is prior to doing it allows them to know, number one, what the expectations are when they get there and where it is that we want them to go. Don't come to the school. You're not going to get your kid at the school. You've got to go to the church down the street, and that's where you're going to get your kid. So there's different opinions about that. Some think it is top secret stuff. There's others that that share it. Um, Bill, your thoughts?
I'm kind of right in the middle. We don't announce it district wide to our parents, but we also, if asked directly, we don't hide it. It's one of those. It's kind of I guess, open information. If people care enough to ask, I figure they would be the ones who would probably read it anyway. We don't broadcast it ahead of time. However, like I said earlier, we shoot for 5 minutes. With 10 minutes is a hard stop for letting people know, and that would be for reunification as well. If we once as soon as we know we're going to have to reunify, then it's going to be out. It'll be out within 5 minutes, definitely within 10 of, hey, here's where we're going and here's exactly what to do, as well. If that makes a little bit of sense, and we may well swing to the side with Scott of announcing it eventually, but I'm not convinced yet that I want to do that. So that's us. That doesn't mean that we're right for sure, because I'm sure there's way better ways to do it, and there are those that won't ever tell anybody anything until that exact moment. But if a parent pushes me and asks, I tell them I don't have a problem with it. It's a well secured venue, so.
This is the only caveat to my position on that is that as a community is that you decide absolutely not, we're not going to share it, is that make sure that you have created a sequence of messaging to parents. Is that from an incident happens at your high school, the district office immediately is putting messaging out to parents. And the last thing is that you're going to hear from us again in 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, they get another message. And 10 minutes later, they get another message. All right. Is that giving them something, all right, just ignoring them and hoping that they don't show up to the school, I think is a fool's play. It's not going to happen. So I was up in Maine training a school district, and that district had uh, a sequence of messaging already canned and ready to go, and I thought that was a pretty good idea. There's true value there. These are just some examples of how do we educate parents. Look, we can have parent meetings and invite them to the school district and want to engage with them, but 90% of the parents aren't going to show up. All right. That's the way it is in my community. I'm sure that the rest of your parents, all 100% are deeply engaged in that and they show up. But understanding that, how do we reach them? And here's some, I think, really good examples is that, PTO meetings, concerts, football games, basketball games. Uh, Fairborn has a brochure that they provide to parents on regards to emergency response, and so being able to hand that out to parents when they come through the gate for a football game, when they show up at the school play, those types of things. And on there has the reunification uh, information that we want parents to know. So, constantly engaging with parents. Knowledge is power. What's the benefit of doing a tabletop exercise for reunification, Bill?
It lets the stakeholders get all together, and you don't tie up the entire school, you don't tie up the entire community or the resources of first responders, but you get together with the stakeholders and sit there and run through a scenario, and it will start to mete out some things that there may be, I guess, misunderstandings where we could have police say, oh, this is how we're going to do it, and the school's like, whoa, time out, that's not going to work, we can't do that with our parents. Or the school says, oh, we need the police and fire to do X, and police and fire say that's absolutely not going to happen. And it lets us do that in the comfort of our boardroom, as opposed to on game day and the pouring down rain when I've got 1,000 kids on my way to my reunification site. It lets us do it right then and find out what will and what won't work, at least on paper, which is the same as any tabletop. Fun fact, the EMA are generally experts at running, at conducting and leading tabletop exercises.
Yeah.
So shout out to our EMAs again.
Right. Amen. Amen. Community partners engaging with those is that, we've talked about that law enforcement function and fire and EMS as well. I think that there has to be beyond SROs and command staff that have an understanding of what's going on with reunification. Is that, as it says here, roll call, having a quick roll call information sharing meeting where we're letting street cops know what's going on, going into the firehouses and saying, hey, this is what our reunification plan is, and letting them know. um, 911 center is that dispatch is critical, is that all information coming in and information going out is in one room for a large portion of that incident that we're dealing with. So that 911 center, those people have an understanding of not only where the reunification site is, that's obviously they need to know that, but what the process is. So if parents call and are wanting information, they get a I don't know, as opposed they get information as opposed to I don't know. So just thinking about everybody when we talk about community partners and who's all involved, and looking at it 30,000 feet, is that making sure that we're all on the same sheet of music in regards to how we're going to do this. Look, I believe that at the end of the day, we're not going to eliminate the chaos. I talk about that with that active shooter response. We're not going to eliminate chaos. We minimize that chaos. Same thing with reunification. All right. That stress level is going to be high. So is that we need to make sure that we're minimizing it as much as we possibly can.
Hey, Scott, a quick, yet another, I guess, commercial for I Love You Guys is they actually have videos for police, for first responders, that you can download and share, for both their standard response protocol and the reunification as well. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. For goodness sakes, don't. But you can use their videos to train your first responders real quickly in roll calls or send it to dispatch for their professional development or whatever. So.
Do I have to pay for those?
Nope. Nope, not at all. 100% free.
Good. And it's free. Can't beat it.
Yep.
We talked about that heavy law enforcement presence at that reunification site. Where are all those cops coming from? Is that remember, we're not talking about as that event is happening at the school. Is the reunification is a couple hours probably after the violence has ceased inside that building, depending on the scale of the event and a whole lot of different things that I think we all understand. But so there's this time to take a breath, and as a community look at our plan and how are we going to deploy our resources, and that sense of safety and security is critical for everybody, for the school staff, for the students, for the parents coming, and that law enforcement presence is necessary. This is just a really minimal example of the law enforcement presence outside of a reunification site. Is that figuring out what's that inner perimeter look like? Where do I need to position police officers so that I can maintain security of the building? I can make sure that nobody goes indoors that they're not allowed to. Make sure that nobody goes out any doors that they're not allowed to. And just thinking about that perspective, and then the traffic flow in, the ingress and egress, and how many cops do I need on the grounds to be able to control that traffic in and then that traffic out. I would tell you is that there's been multiple examples of reunification done in this country that traffic coordination, traffic direction was not part of that plan, and it turned the reunification process upside down. Because there was such a gridlock of traffic that parents couldn't get to the reunification site. So that traffic flow has to be critical to that. Rural America, firefighters may be utilized in this function as well, alongside with law enforcement. It's just an example, once again, using the StrataSite platform, is that deciding where we're going to drop those barricades and be able to control that traffic flow to the reunification site and back out. Do I need barricades and personnel, or can I do it with just barricades? And you think about it, if I pre-plot where all these barricades are going, I can get that to whoever has barricade responsibilities beforehand, and they know where those barricades go that day. And it's one less thing that we have to think about from a command and control standpoint, is that it's something that's already happening. There's no such thing as too much pre-planning when it's, especially when we're talking about reunification. What's the benefit of conducting a drill as opposed to just a tabletop exercise, Bill?
So we talked about the tabletops will help kind of meet out any things that, disagreements or misunderstandings between different organizations or even within the organization. What the drill actually allows you to do is get on the ground from the perspective of who's going to be there, and actually walk through what's going to happen, something similar to what would happen on game day. What I'll tell you from our perspective is we had tabletopped reunifications. We came up with a reunification plan for the sports arena years before, like I'd mentioned. When we actually did the reunification exercise, went through, I love you guys, we were there on site and actually doing our reunification drills, or walkthroughs with them. And what we found was what we'd planned for over 10 years of how to drop the kids off would absolutely not work. It worked. It survived multiple tabletops, but when we actually got there and stood on site with actual, parents who were, role players and students who were role players, it absolutely would not have worked. It would have been it would have been a disaster. So we were able to change it very quickly just based on conducting that drill. And I'm sure there's agencies all over the country that have had the exact same plan. Not to mention it gives you the actual perspective right there. So anybody who's participating actually has the perspective as opposed to that 30,000-foot view. They're actually at ground zero of that actual reunification. So beyond tabletops, we have to do drills as well.
We talked about those external stakeholders and who we need to train, parents, students. Is that thinking about your admin, is that make sure that their training is a little bit different than what we're going to give all staff in regards to that reunification process. New employees, those new employees that come in throughout the school year. And I would also add to that your substitute teachers. All right. This is 2025. There has to be some sort of engagement that we have with substitute teachers in our school district today. Have to. All right. Is that and them understanding what reunification is from their perspective. Very, very high level. All right. We're not getting deep into the weeds with them, but something there. School bus drivers. We're going to depend on school bus drivers to get students from the school to the reunification site, or from those rally points to the reunification site. They have to know where to drop students off. Those logistics that we talked about, students getting dropped off at a particular door for that reunification site, making sure that they understand, what their responsibilities are, and what maybe there's a particular path that you want them to take, a route that you want them to take. And look, quizzing is always a good idea. Is that we don't have enough time with our school staff in regards to all things emergency preparedness. So we engage with them in training, and then maybe through your StrataSite learning management system, creating quizzes for them throughout the year, or from Power School or some other platform that you have that has a learning management system, and reinforcing what it is that they learned at that training, that face-to-face training that they got. How do we evaluate and revise it, Bill?
When you do conduct your tabletops and drills, look for weaknesses. When you sit down and review it yearly, look for people. You could hire, for instance, we just hired a new assistant superintendent who came in and saw some things that go, what about this? And he looked at it from a different point of view than anybody else had. So now we can review it and say, okay, does this work, or is there a better way to do it? But it should be reviewed at least annually, and every time after you conduct a tabletop or a drill or an exercise, review it and see, is there a better way to do this, and what is that better way?
We talked about the I Love You guys and the resources that they provide to us as honestly as school districts across America. Um, the Rigby, Idaho, I posted that in the chat. Take a look at that after action review. And it's not just about the reunification process. It's about the entire incident. Some lessons learned from that is that wherever you are in regards to that school safety perspective, you're going to get something out of that review. And then honestly, another resource for you is Fairborn City Schools. Is that, ladies and gentlemen, I think he's demonstrated over the past 80 minutes or so, is that Bill Titley knows what he's talking about when it comes to school safety. Now, there's 75, 80 people in this webinar. I don't recommend that all of you pick up the phone and call Bill Titley tomorrow to find out about reunification. But I will tell you this is that I'm going to speak for him, and he's going to say, yeah, you're right. Is that if you need help with something, you have a question about something, reach out to him at the school. All right, send him an email, and he will be more than happy to help you. He's not going to answer you right away because he's got better things to do at that given time, but not better things, but you know what I mean. And so, it truly is a resource. And honestly, from a school safety perspective, whether it's Bill Titley or Scott Lowry at StrataSite, if there's ever any questions that you have in regards to your school safety initiatives, give us a call. All right, is that if we don't know, if it hasn't been demonstrated to us by a school district somewhere in America, we know somebody to call that can get us the answers that you're looking for. All right, 15-second question commercial on why StrataSite is your answer for all things pre-planning. All right, is that look, at the end of the day, if we don't figure out what we're going to do during a critical incident beforehand, we're not going to do what it is that we should be doing. That has been demonstrated multiple times historically across this country that it just doesn't work. Create a plan, identify the stakeholders that need to be part of that process, bring them in, share the plan with them, all right, pushing this plan out, inviting them into the platform, let them consume the plan. Then if the unthinkable happens, through our partnership with Rapid SOS, we can push plans to the 911 center. Through our integration with emergency notification, mass notification systems, we can put the plan in the palms of people's hands when they need to know it. Quite honestly, is that it is incredibly comprehensive. It meets the standard in regards to best practices in this country in regards to community-wide response. And one of the things that I told the developers at the very beginning when StrataSite started in 2018, two things have to happen. Number one, it has to be easy to use. Number two, it has to be dirt cheap, because I don't want somebody wanting the ability to plan and not being able to afford the platform. Right. And quite honestly, is that I've been told I'm leaving money on the table because of the fact that this is so efficient for school districts and communities to use. So at the end, give me a call. All right. Hop on a Zoom call, demonstrate to you something you're interested in, can have additional conversations. But I can almost guarantee you that it's going to take you to the next level in regards to the capabilities of the community as a whole to respond, whether it's a critical incident in the building or being able to implement reunification. We're running a little bit late. We've got about we do have 8 questions that have been put in. And so anyone, if you need to leave at that, it's a hard stop at 11:30 for you. Um, go to the StrataSite website, and I'm going to move forward to that. All right. If it's a hard stop for you and you have to go, my email address, my phone number, give me a call, send me an email, and we'll connect. Kent, my good friend Kent, is going to read the questions to us. Kent,
Sure.
go ahead.
Thanks, guys. Do have some good questions here today. Bianca had a question. Do you recommend having a rally point where everyone, students and staff, know where to evacuate, and then a different point for reunification, where this is shared to parents day of event?
No, I'm going to let you answer that one.
Okay, so rally points would be if the kids and staff rapidly evacuate the building, if they have to get out and it's safer to get out, which is kind of a discussion for another day. But if they're going to rapidly evac, they would go to the rally points. Generally, if we're going to do an evacuation to a reunification site, at that point it's going to be generally orderly. We push out, and I know Hancock County up where Scott's from does as well. We push out our rally point locations, and the kids practice walking there. Again, that's a discussion for a whole nother day. So the kids practice going there. We staff it with law enforcement, but the kids and the staff all know right where they're at. They practice them at least once a year, generally more than once a year to each rally point. If that answers the question, but they're
Great.
different reunification sites, which was another
I will
question.
just, I'm gonna build on that just a little bit. Is that rapidly evacuate to the rally point. So we as a school need to have a plan for getting buses to that rally
Yep,
point so that we
absolutely.
can get them to the reunification site. That has to be part of that reunification plan. How do I get students from the school to the reunification site? How do I get students from the rally points to the reunification site?
Yep. And when you're picking rally points, it should be picked so that you can get buses to them. There's other considerations as well, but you like just like Scott said, you should be able to get buses to or very close to rally points. Yep.
Yep.
Great. So, Galen, as a quick question about locations, do you have any experience with districts using an indoor mall as a reunification location?
Scott, was it you and I that just had this conversation, or was that?
It was not, I don't believe it was me.
It was, you
No.
know what, it wasn't. It was another one of our trainers and I, we were just up in Minnesota and they just had one where they did that. It was a very small school though. I can't speak to having experiences either way, but it seems to me based on having watched and read after actions on dozens of reunifications that if it's a larger school, especially, that's going to be an issue with having people stay in their cars. But
Okay.
one that we talked to in Minnesota, I don't remember which district it was, but it was up in the up along the Canadian border. They had just done one in the last year, I believe, and it worked fantastically. What
Okay.
they said, yeah.
Thanks. Next question is from Cameron. Have you guys ever seen an effective reunification that took place in the vehicle queue instead of having them exit the vehicle?
I have seen drills, exercises, utilizing that process. To my knowledge, actual reunification post critical incident, I have not seen it done, but I have seen the process done. Yes,
Okay, thanks.
Bill.
Oh, that's good. Yep.
Yep.
Great. Additional, a quick question from Bianca, probably referring to what we may have mentioned in supplies, but what would you use wristbands for?
Yep.
Well, and I know that she's referring to, if you look at the I Love You guys, their supply list, they include them in there. The way kind of we plan on doing it, we have enough for per color per grade level plus is kind of to band the kids by grade level. That way we can a quick glance keep people in together by grade level and then by class or however else we want to do it. It helps to if you're using just the colored wristbands, which I have here, but I won't dig them out. But if you're using just a colored wristbands, it's a quick ID. so you can look and see, okay, that kid's green, they're an eighth grader. That kid's yellow, they're actually going to be a sixth grader, something like that, to help differentiate groups very quickly. There are some groups, I know a couple other companies who run their reunifications, they actually have wristbands that actually have barcodes on them or QR codes so they can scan the kid in and out, or they use the wristband in conjunction with the reunification cards as well. But we aren't nearly that high tech, so we're not doing it that way.
Another question here from an anonymous attendee. Is there a possibility we can have access to the canned messaging that's been referenced as a starting point for our own messaging?
Yeah. So Scott, is my email address somewhere on this or my phone number?
No.
Okay.
Somebody send me an email and I will get you in touch with Bill. That's going to be the
Yeah.
easiest
Yeah.
right now.
I've shared that I've shared that file out to anybody that wants to look. It's not perfect. We stole a lot of them and then we changed a lot for our own, but I'm happy to share that. Also, we were talking about the brochures and training the parents. I do have copies of the brochures. We just finished redoing them yesterday though, so they weren't ready to be uploaded onto this, but I'm happy to share those if anybody wants to steal that and correct my spelling errors, you're welcome to.
Great. So I think that wraps up all the questions in our queue. I'll just say that we will be publishing a recording of this session over the next couple of days on stratasite.io. All attendees will receive an email with a link to this recording, and there'll also be a link and some more information happening on the StrataSite LinkedIn channel. So if you haven't had a chance to visit any of those, you can go there, like, follow, etc., to get information.
Hey, Kent, real quick. In one of the answered questions, I don't know if Maureen is still on here or not, but she said, is it recommended to keep supplies at the reunification site, such as lists of students, signs, toys, etc.? There's different. Scott, do you have any strong feelings on this?
My feelings on the kit are depending on where the reunification site, what type of facility it is. Do you have the ability to secure that at the reunification site, storage closet or whatever? All right, that may work. I've always recommended that a kit be outside of the building, right? Whether we're duplicating the kit. So if I have a kit inside the high school, there's another kit, a duplicate in another school building or at the district office, so that we have, once again, have that redundancy. So we're not, so we can always access the kit no matter what the type of emergency was in the school building.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and in addition to that, she mentioned lists of students. We don't even keep paper lists. What we have, I mean, we do have a paper list that, in theory, the secretaries are going to bring with them, but we understand that's not going to be updated because it doesn't get updated when we get new students necessarily all the time. But we do have those flash drives that go with. We don't leave our kits in the reunification site just because it's a large place, and even if we could lock it up. We don't know who, it's not secure necessarily. That's number one. Number two, just like emergency operation plans should be really living, breathing documents. That kit really should be living, breathing, and well maintained. And I know if I take my kit over to our basketball arena, then I'm not going to look at it. I know I'm not going to. But if I keep it in my office and we have one at the board office and one at the other schools, then I know that people put hands on those, and I know we can go through those at regular intervals. So there you go.
Perfect. Any other questions?
Don't see any more in the queue.
Ladies and gentlemen, 5 minutes late is really good for Bill and I, especially on this subject. Is that we've talked a lot longer than 90 minutes, 95 minutes on this subject. So I appreciate your time. Once again, my email address, my phone number. If you want to get a hold of Bill, send me an email and I will put you in touch with him. It's not a sales pitch. I'm not going to like stalk you because you emailed Scott at StrataSite. So once again, appreciate your time.